Many years ago, my friends and I were dumb, new 21-year-olds, just barely navigating the bar scene in Philly, where we went to college. We hadn't had many weird interactions, save for the occasional creep who would hit on us, even when we tried to tell him to get lost. But in July of that summer, we were really enjoying the outdoor cocktails at a bar in Old City when a girl came by. She was around our age, early 20s, with a cool haircut and an outfit that I loved. She looked very cool. I don't know how else to put it. She looked like someone worth hanging out with. I was smoking at the time, and she asked me for a cigarette and talked to my friend and me for a little bit, just bitching about boys and work and that kind of thing. My friend and I were kind of desperate for friends because all of ours had left the city for the summer, so we were glad to have someone our age to talk to. Finally, after we get to know each other a bit, the girl asked my friend, who we'll call Amy, and me to come to her apartment. She says they're holding a party that evening, and then she heads off. Amy and I think, why the hell not? We're bumming around the city that evening with nothing to do. We might as well try to make some friends. In my mature age now, I realize that's dumb as hell. You don't just follow a girl who you just met over a cigarette to another location. A couple of hours later, we were really bored and decided to head to the address the girl gave us. Only, when we got there, we realized it was a penthouse on the river. The girl had given me her phone number, and I texted her saying we were there. At this point, Amy was a little wary. We both thought it would be some 20-something apartment, not a penthouse. This girl comes out of the elevator, followed by a man in maybe his 40s or late 30s at least. I didn't expect that. But Amy and I were both trying to be polite, so we followed them into the elevator. During the ride up, the girl told us she was a dancer. I immediately saw that as code for stripper, but who the hell am I to judge, I thought. So what if she's a stripper? I chided myself for even making the connection. When we get to the top, we're on the 14th floor. The elevator opens into an apartment, not a hallway, just straight into the apartment. It was honestly gorgeous. All marble, TV mounted into the wall, huge rug, etc. We stepped inside, and Amy and I immediately felt nervous. There were 3 other men there, clearly in their 40s. We again felt like we had to be polite, though this wasn't at all what we were expecting. The girl ran off into another room and disappeared, while Amy and I made our way into the kitchen. One of the 40-year-olds grinned at us in a terribly creepy way, and pulled one of the many bottles of wine he had from a wine rack and poured us each a glass. While he was doing this and chatting with us, the other 3 men circled around us, staring. Amy and I were pretty freaked out at that point, and Amy started to say that we were late for a friend's house party. We got up to leave, but one of the men grabbed my arm, telling me, "You're not allowed to leave." Needless to say, that freaked us out even more. Amy and I sat back down and planned our next move by texting each other under the counter, saying, "How do we get out of here?" Around that time, the girl we'd met ran back into the kitchen, completely naked. One of the guys grabbed her, and the 2 of them ran back into a room together, leaving 3 men circling Amy and me. I was stressed out, so I decided to have a cigarette. There was a guy who had been really focused on me, so that when I went out to the balcony, he followed. I smoked a cigarette trying to ignore him, despite the fact that it was a tiny balcony and he was staring at me the whole time. Finally, he came up to me and started rubbing against me. I pushed him off and went to the other corner of the balcony. It was pouring rain at this point, and I was worried about Amy, so I told the guy that we both had to leave. "No, you're not allowed to leave. You have to stay. We're just getting started," he told me. That was one of the last straws. I tossed my cigarette into the rain and pushed open the sliding glass door. I grabbed Amy by the wrist and yelled, "We're late for our friend's party," and pushed the elevator button. Miraculously, the elevator hadn't moved in the time we'd been up to the penthouse. Amy and I ran inside and pressed the door button repeatedly, watching as the man who had followed me to the balcony charged after us, trying to catch us before the door closed. Thank God he didn't. The door closed just before he reached us, and we went downstairs, finally spilling out into the lobby. I turned around and saw, by the lights and numbers above the door, that the elevator was going back up to floor 14. Amy and I bolted, terrified that one of the guys would follow us down and try to catch us. We ran into the rain and booked it down several blocks before we finally stopped. To this day, we're both freaked out by that encounter. I still think it was too pushy. They wouldn't let us leave after multiple times that we told them we had to get out of there. Amy agrees with me, and has since told me that when I was on the balcony, another man inside told her that she also wasn't allowed to leave. I don't know if that's freaky enough, but hell, it was pretty freaky to me. During my freshman and sophomore years of college, I was extremely awkward. I had just come out as gay, and I didn't have many friends, and I was just generally kind of a big wad of social anxiety. Given that I didn't even have the social skills to make a few friends, it's not surprising that I also had literally no dating experience. Miraculously, over the course of the summer after sophomore year, I just sort of grew out of my worst awkwardness. I lost some weight, had a lot more confidence in myself, and my self-esteem was a lot higher. I came back to school in August, and by October I had a decent number of genuine friends and had gotten a lot more involved on campus. With my newfound confidence, I decided I'd finally download Grindr and see what it was like. For anyone who doesn't know, Grindr is a gay dating app that's primarily used for finding sex and hookups. Despite my recent improvement in the social arena, I was still extremely naive and inexperienced when it came to dating and sex. I set up my Grindr profile with a nice picture of myself and a very brief bio, and I got a lot of messages very quickly after my picture got approved. One guy who messaged me had a display name of Dad for Young, which should have been my first red flag, but I was oblivious. I should note that I look really young for my age. At the time I was 21, but I was regularly asked by campus staff which middle or high school I was visiting from. I'm 23 now, and I still get asked if I want a kids menu if I go to a restaurant with my parents. It's pretty bad. So Dad for Young sends me a message that just says, "What's up?" and I reply without looking at his profile first. I then look at his profile and notice that he's 54. His only profile text says, "The younger the better," and his only picture was a zoomed-in blurry picture of a hairy chest, so I was very much not interested. But given my inexperience, I thought ignoring him would be horribly rude, so I kept responding. I don't totally remember what we talked about in the maybe 10 or so messages we exchanged at first, but I do remember him telling me that I was very cute. I know I told him I was a student, but I never mentioned which college I went to. It's important to note that I went to college in a major city, and there's a bunch of different colleges all within 5 miles of each other, and a few more within 10 miles of those. Sort of like Tinder, Grindr works based off of your location, but much more precisely. If you're less than a mile or two away from someone who's online, it will display the distance in feet. I noticed that Dad for Young's profile said he was 25 miles away, which I thought was kind of far. The man started getting more sexual in his chats and asked if I wanted to meet up. I felt bad flat out denying him since he had been so polite, so I told him that I didn't want to meet up with him that day, but we could keep chatting if he wanted. I figured that was that, and when I checked 20 minutes later, it said he was offline. Nope. About 30 minutes after that, I get another message from him. "Hey," insert my name. "I got a wild hair and thought I'd take a nice drive out to," insert my college. I had not told him the name of my college, nor had I told him what part of town I was in. I looked at his profile and it now said he was 3 miles away. I started freaking out a little, and didn't reply to his message in hopes that he'd just leave me alone. His profile now says that he's a little under 2,500 feet away, and every time I reopened his profile, the distance would decrease a little bit. I was fully losing my shit at this point, since this guy had the ability to pinpoint my location, so I shut my blinds, turned off my light, and locked my window. I locked the door to my apartment and my bedroom door. My roommate was out of town on some kind of retreat, so it was just me. He kept sending me messages every minute or so, saying things like, "I'm gonna find you," and "Here I come," and other supremely creepy shit like that. The distance was down to 310 feet, and I was completely losing my mind and didn't know what to do, so I just deleted my whole profile. Nothing else happened that night, though I was absolutely terrified he was going to come knocking on my door. Fast forward to 3 days later. I decided to re-download Grindr after doing more research and seeing that I can adjust the settings so that my exact location is not visible. When I logged on the first time with my remade profile, I adjusted the search filters until the results were specific enough to display Dad for Young's profile, which I promptly blocked. Later that evening, I get a message from someone with the display name "Will Find You," with the same gross profile picture as the other guy, and my stomach sinks. He sent a flurry of messages. "You fucked up. Almost got the police called on me because of you. I couldn't find you, so I had to go to other dorms and find someone else. Said I was outside his dorm and told me to leave and he'd call the cops. I'm coming for that sweet virgin asshole." Freaked out, I blocked him again, deleted my profile, and then deleted Grindr. I refused to re-download it, or any other dating apps for about a year after that, at which point I worked up the courage to try again, and have not heard from this nutjob since. Thank God. I posted a story on here not long ago about my sister's creepy ex, John. Well, this one's about my cousin now. It happened a year before the encounter with John. I was 9 years old, and my family was living with my auntie in her small, crowded house. My auntie, her daughter Stacy, my cousin Valerie, and my mom used to drink a lot in that house, so I dreaded the days when it turned night, because I would have to hear people in the living room and kitchen laughing loudly, screaming at the top of their lungs to some old country songs, and fighting. We live in a reserve, so it happened a lot. All reserve parties are rowdy and end with someone fighting, basically. This was a daily thing while living in that house. I noticed a guy who was always there every night they would party, because he was one of the first people to show up for the party. When they started to arrive, I would take my younger siblings to the room and stay in there until we fell asleep. One night I was wanting a glass of water, so I went out of the room even though the party was still happening, and poured myself a glass of water. While I was doing that, I noticed the guy who was always first to arrive was staring at me. He never took his eyes off me. It creeped me out, but I paid no attention to it. The next day, he comes over during the day around like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and my mom introduces me to him, saying he was my cousin that I never met. He seemed nice at first, but he gave off a weird vibe, and I got a really bad feeling about him. I tried to keep my distance from him. Later on that night, I was watching my younger siblings and little cousins, while my mom and auntie and them went out to pick up some alcohol. I didn't mind because at least it was just us kids in the house, and we get to run around the house and do whatever we want. So we were playing in the laundry room, shutting off and on the lights and dancing. We heard that if you dance while the lights were flashing on and off repeatedly really fast, and if you stopped dancing, keep the light on and look at your shadow, it would still be dancing, so we tried it out. Nothing happened until we heard a knock at the door, which made us all jump scared. I went to go answer it because I was the oldest in the house at the time. It was my cousin. I froze and just stared. He then said, "Is your auntie home?" I replied with no, and then he asked how about my mother. I replied again with no. I knew it was stupid to say they weren't there, but he was my cousin, and I didn't think anything of it at the time. He then told me that he would be back later to check up on us, as in us kids. I just shrugged and then shut the door and locked it. I wasn't in the mood to play with the kids after that, so I just sat on the couch and watched High School Musical. My auntie, mother, and the rest got back, so I took the kids in the room and put them to bed. I stayed in there too because no way I'm going to be around drunks. I've been around drunks basically every night from when I was 6 up until 17. Probably one of the reasons I don't drink or do drugs. Later that night, I noticed the door creaking open slowly, then a male figure walking in. It was dark and I was half asleep. I just stared until he got to the edge of the bed where my little brother was sleeping. He was at the edge, my baby sister was in the middle, and I was at the corner. He just stared at him when I finally got some words out and said, "What are you doing?" because he was trying to lift up the blanket. He then looked at me and said, "Oh, your mom told me to come check up on you guys." He then walks out of the room and shuts the door behind him. I tried to go back to bed, but not 5 minutes after that incident, he came back in, shut the door, and locked it with a butter knife. He turns to me and says, "Have you ever seen a penis before?" Right then and there, I felt sick to my stomach. I tried to tell him to get out or I'm screaming for my cousin Stacy, but the words were never able to leave my lips. When I didn't say anything, he crawled under the bottom bunk, we had a bunk bed, to where I was, and takes off the blanket from me and tries to take off my shorts, but I pulled it up before he could take them down below my waist. I said no, and then he looked at me again, this time in my face, and asked once more, "Have you ever seen a penis before?" I still couldn't get the words out. I was frozen and just stared at him in complete shock. He crawled away from me and back to the door, and kept repeating that scary sentence. I'd had enough courage to say to him, "Get out, or I'm screaming for Stacy, and she'll come in here if I call for her. And if she finds you in here with us, all those guys out there will beat you up." He stared at me for a while and then left. I couldn't sleep after that, so I stayed up. My cousin Valerie came in and got an extra bed from out of the room. I asked her, "Did everyone leave? Is Ryan gone?" She told me that he was gone and not to worry about it and just go back to bed. Then she left out of the room. 5 minutes later, my mom walks in and crawls on the top bunk. I tell her that he tried to rape me, and I cry just saying that. She was quiet for a while and then finally said, "Are you sure?" I told her that I was, and she got so mad she wanted to leave and kick his ass. But then I said, "Mom, do you think I should tell Dad so that he can beat him up?" She replied with no, and that she'd deal with him herself. Big mistake. The next day I woke up. Ryan was there in the kitchen laughing and chatting with my mom. I never felt so betrayed in my life. I hate his guts, even to this day, and I never trusted my mom again. I never tell her anything. I still see Ryan around the reserve from time to time, and I instantly get mad when I see him. I always tell my little sister, even though she's 14 now, to never ever go near Ryan, ever. That he's a child molester, and that I should have told my dad. I told my older sister about it, and she knew something was off about him. My old best friend hated his guts too. I guess Ryan did a hit and run on her dad, and her dad died instantly after he was hit. Ryan, karma will come for you. But until it does, let's never meet again. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here, as always. I just wanted to thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you enjoyed the video, please feel free to leave feedback in the comments below, or perhaps like, share, or subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you have a personal story that you'd like to send in, or if you'd just like to message me sometime, go ahead and take a look in the description below. There will be links to all of my social media accounts, including my Facebook, Gmail, and Twitter account. Go ahead and check any of those out and send me a message, and I'll try to include your story in a video or get back to you as soon as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the tagline the name of the story and any possible themes it might have, as well as how you'd like to be credited in the description of the video the story appears in. If you're curious at all about the music used in today's video, you can go ahead and check down there in the description. The music is always listed in the description below, in the order which it appears. I also name the tracks and provide links to the artists if you feel like checking out more of their work. Last but not least, if you guys have any constructive criticism, please feel free to leave it in the comments below, as I'm always looking for new ways to improve the channel. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.